Let's start with breast pathology from Ramdas Nayak. So basically the female breast is made of two major components, the terminal duct lobular unit or the TDLU, which includes the lobule plus the terminal duct, intralobular terminal duct. So this lobule basically includes the terminal ductules or the acini plus the stroma. So the parenchyma and the stroma constitutes the lobule. Okay, along with the duct, it forms the TDLU, and the TDLU along with the large duct system forms the breast. Okay, so basically this is about the TDLU, the large duct system. See, the intralobular terminal ducts, they emerge to form the extralobular terminal duct, which then combine to form the subsegmental duct, then the segmental duct, then the lactiferous sinus, which is a fusiform dilatation, and then it converges to form the collecting duct or the lactiferous duct or the galactophorus duct, which then opens into the nipple. Microscopy. So the lining of the ducts and lobules, there are basically two cells, the inner epithelium with secretory and absorptive functions, and the outer myoepithelial cells. And the stroma, you have intralobular and extralobular stroma. So benign epithelial lesions of the breast first, based on the classification, we have non-proliferative breast changes, also called fibrocystic changes. So there is no increased risk of carcinoma in non-proliferative changes. So fibrocystic changes, cystic, okay, they affect the lobular unit, so TDLU. So basically it is a group of changes that consists of many common morphological changes observed in the breast. Okay, so basically what happens is fibrocystic changes, they affect the TDLU. The cysts can be microscopic or grossly visible. So the small cysts may coalesce to form larger cysts, and cysts contain, see, externally they appear blue or brown. So they are called blue dome cysts of Bloodgood. Okay, good blood or whatever it is, blue dome cysts of Bloodgood externally. Internally, they are filled with a turbid, cloudy yellow, semi-translucent fluid. Okay, and they are lined by either flattened atrophic epithelium or metaplastic apocrine cells. The next change, fibrocystic change, is apocrine metaplasia because they may line the cysts. Okay, so what are the apocrine cystic metaplastic cells? So they are seen in dilated ducts and cystic structures, obviously. So they are abundant granular. So here you can see they are abundant granular. They have abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm. They have a round nucleus with prominent nucleolus, and they have an apocrine snout, which is a cytoplasmic extension. Okay, next we have calcification. So cysts are lined by flattened epithelial cells or atrophic epithelial cells or metaplastic apocrine cells. So then we have calcification. So in the cyst at the bottom, if there is calcification, so then mammographers use the term milk of calcium to describe it. Next, fibrosis. So calcification has happened, then fibrosis is usually seen, and chronic inflammation, fibrosis, and hyalinization contribute to the firmness of the breast during palpation. So hyalinization, fibrosis, and chronic inflammation. Finally, adenosis. It is an increase in the number of acini per lobule. So acini are often enlarged, blunt duct adenosis, and they are lined by columnar cells. Okay, they are secretory, which may appear benign or show atypical features, so flat epithelial atypia. Next, we have lactational adenoma, which develops as palpable masses in pregnant or lactating women, and they show normal appearing breast tissue. The only change is lactational change. They show an exaggerated local response to gestational hormones. So there is normal breast tissue, there are palpable masses, but they exaggerate in response to local gestational hormones. Now moving on to proliferative breast diseases without atypia. So it is characterized by proliferation of both ductal epithelium and the stroma, but without atypia, that is without cytological or architectural features of carcinoma in situ. So first we have epithelial hyperplasia. Okay, so here you can see the normal breast ducts and lobules are lined by two layers of cells, so luminal epithelial cells, inner and outer myoepithelial cells. So epithelial hyperplasia is defined as presence of more than two cell layers. The cell layers may be both luminal and myoepithelial cells, and they fill and distend the ducts and lobules. Okay, so that is why the lumens are irregular. So epithelial hyperplasia, it may be mild when made of 3 to 4 epithelial cells in thickness, moderate, florid, and atypical. Next, we have sclerosing adenosis. So first we have epithelial hyperplasia, then glands. You have sclerosing adenosis. So number of acini per lobule increase, adenosis, okay? And the architecture is same, but central cellularity is more than the periphery. So that is why central acini appear compressed and the peripheral acini appear dilated, and it may mimic invasive carcinoma. Then complex sclerosing lesion, it includes the above two, that is epithelial hyperplasia plus sclerosing adenosis plus the next one, which is papilloma. So what is a papilloma? Papilloma is basically it's a structure with a multiple branching fibrovascular core lined by both luminal and myoepithelial cells, which grows in a dilated duct. Okay, So it is single in a large duct, usually in the lactiferous sinus, and then it is there are multiple in small ducts. So it is single in large duct, right? So the large papillae, they produce nipple discharge, and torsion on the papilloma duct stalk, it causes infarction of the papilloma leading to a bloody discharge. They are detected as palpable masses or densities or calcifications. Moving on to proliferative breast disease with atypia, it includes atypical ductal hyperplasia and lobular hyperplasia. So basically, proliferative breast diseases with atypia, they resemble carcinoma in situ, but they differ in that they are limited in extent and the cells do not distend more than 50% of the ductal lobule. There is partial filling only. So basically, proliferative breast disease with atypia, you have ductal and lobular hyperplasia. So atypical ductal hyperplasia, first point is it resembles ductal carcinoma in situ. Lobular hyperplasia resembles lobular carcinoma in situ. But the only difference being in this, the extent is limited and only it is partially filled. The duct is partially filled. In lobular hyperplasia, the cells are also only partially fill the lobule, so they do not fill or distend more than 50% of the SNA within a lobule. So non-proliferative changes do not progress to cancer, but proliferative disease is associated with mild increase in risk. But with atypia, there is a moderate increased risk of carcinoma. Moving on to carcinoma of the breast. So basically, it is the second most common cancer after carcinoma cervix. So etiology, we have risk factors. So the first important risk factor, most important one is gender. It only occurs in 1% of males, mostly in females, 99%. Age, so it usually develops after the age of 25 years and it peaks at 70 to 80 years. And then geographic variations, it depends on the type of diet, because coffee consumption decreases the risk. It depends on number of pregnancies and timing of pregnancies, thereby the reproductive patterns. Breastfeeding decreases the risk of cancer. So you have all that in the geographical patterns. So physical activity may have a protective role because you're decreasing the fat cells which express estrogen, and overexpression of estrogen or estrogen receptors increases the risk of breast cancer. And race or ethnicity, basically BRCA1 and 2 mutations occur at different frequencies in different races, so that also influences. And then you have prolonged exposure to estrogens, which increases the risk of breast carcinoma. So endogenous hormone exposure, it occurs in early menarche and late menopause, so there is longer duration of reproductive life, and there is late age at first term pregnancy. So basically all those hormonal changes in pregnancy, they are exaggerated at a later age. In postmenopausal obesity, because adipocytes, they have aromatase, so what they do is they convert testosterone to estrogen, so increased estrogen synthesis in the fat depots. And exogenous hormone exposure due to postmenopausal hormone replacement therapy. Then we have mutations, so germline mutations, and then family history of first degree relatives with breast cancer. So the risk is more if the relative had breast cancer at a young age or developed bilateral breast cancer. Then we have environmental risk factors, radiation exposure, environmental toxins, so organochlorine pesticides, so they have estrogenic effects, and cigarette smoking. Then benign breast disease, so that also is a precursor lesion, right? And breast density, so women with very dense breasts on mammography have a 4-fold to 6-fold higher risk of both ER positive and negative breast cancer, because higher breast radio density indicates deficient involution of lobules at the end of each menstrual cycle. Okay. Then we also have other possible factors: a high fat diet, moderate or heavy alcohol consumption, and oral contraceptives. So breast cancer can be divided into 3 major subtypes depending on the differential expression of hormone receptors and HER2. So we have basically ER positive, ER negative, and HER2 amplification. So 3 pathways. Okay, so the contributing factors are genetic, hormonal, and environmental. So genetic, basically we have BRCA1 and 2 mutations. So familial breast cancer, the major germline mutations affect genes that regulate genomic instability or are involved in pro-growth signaling pathways. So BRCA1 and 2 are tumor suppressor genes. Okay, so breast cancer develops only when both the alleles are inactivated or defective. So BRCA1 and 2, they encode proteins that are necessary for repair of certain DNA damage. So germline mutations increases the risk of breast and serous ovarian cancer. And BRCA2 mutations are mainly associated with ER positive cancers, and BRCA1 is usually associated with triple negative cancers. Okay, so other mutated genes, we have TP53 mutations and PTEN mutations. So PI3K-AKT pathway is a pro-growth pathway. So PTEN is a negative regulator of pro-growth pathway. So mutations here, they increase the PI3K-AKT signaling. Then we have sporadic breast cancers. So we have somatic mutations in BRCA1 and 2. So in 50% of triple negative cancers, somatic inactivation of BRCA1 takes place by methylation. Okay, we also have TP53 mutations which are common in breast cancer. There is amplification of the HER2 gene. So HER2 is a receptor tyrosine kinase. So it promotes the proliferation of cells and opposes apoptosis by stimulating the RAS and PI3K signaling. So the common driver mutation in breast cancer is amplification of HER2. So in the past, these patients were considered to have a poor prognosis, but now we have therapeutic agents that specifically target the HER2 receptors, so they markedly improve the prognosis for these patients. We also have hormonal influences. So estrogens stimulate the production of growth factors and they promote the development of tumor through paracrine and autocrine mechanisms. So hormonal influences are involved in the development of cancers from precursor lesions to fully malignant and metastatic carcinomas. Environmental factors, we have contributions of environmental factors in breast cancers, which is substantiated by different geographical variations. So moving on to the pathogenesis, in the first pathway we have germline BRCA2 mutations, ER positive pathway. Okay, most are ER positive. So ER positive pathways you can see here. So you have 1q gain, 16q loss, and pi3k CA mutations. Okay, so pi3k signaling is increased, right? So there is increase in the cell. So atypical ductal hyperplasia, precursor lesion, DCIS, and then ER positive, HER2 negative. Next we have HER2 amplification. So germline TP53 mutation immediately causes HER2 amplification, DCIS, and HER2 positive or enriched. Next, germline BRCA1 mutations. It is a negative pathway, okay, triple negative. So TP53 mutation, also BRCA1 inactivation leads to DCIS and basal like, okay. So HER2 positive cancers, they arrive through a different mechanism. And ER negative cancers, they occur through a different mechanism. So the role of stromal cells, basically neoplastic epithelial cells are dependent on interactions with stromal cells in the local microenvironment. So basically more the stromal density, more the cancer risk, because it suggests that stroma is both a marker of risk and biologically important for tumorigenesis. So changes in the stroma may create a microenvironment required for tumor development and growth. So moving on to breast carcinoma. So broadly, you can classify it as non-invasive and invasive based on whether it is infiltrating the basement membrane or not. So but the WHO classification, we have first the precursor lesions, so DCIS and LCIS obviously, so which is non-invasive. Then we have invasive. So first we have no special type, okay, NST, then invasive lobular carcinoma, and then MMT, so medullary mucinous and tubular carcinoma. Then so precursor invasive PAPA, so PIPA, okay. So then papillary lesions, we have papilloma, papillary carcinoma, and solid papillary carcinoma. Then tumors of the nipple, we have nipple adenoma and Paget's disease, and fibroepithelial tumors, we have fibroadenoma and phylloid tumor. In clinical pattern, we have inflammatory carcinoma. So precursor lesions, we have DCIS and LCIS. Okay, so first starting with DCIS, remove DC. Marvel DC is a hit, right? So it's a comet, a shooting star. So comet, remember Commodore classification, okay? So DCIS consists of malignant cells limited to the ducts. Okay, they're precursor lesions, so they are not infiltrative. They do not infiltrate the basement membrane. The myoepithelial cells are preserved. They involve usually the small and medium-sized ducts because, see, they can't involve the large duct because you don't get the lump centrally. You get it peripherally, right? So smaller ducts and lobules. It can spread throughout the ducts and lobules. So it is divided into two subtypes basing on the architecture. So DCIS Comedo or high-grade subtype and non-Comedo, which further has these solid cribriform papillary and micropapillary modes. So first, DCIS Comedo, so DC, okay, dystrophic calcification of central necrotic core, okay, and also the central core. After that, you have ducts containing solid sheets of very large pleomorphic epithelial cells. So I for eomorphic pleomorphic epithelial cells. So S for sheets of solid cells. Okay, with hyperchromatic nuclei, they're pleomorphic cells. Okay, the gross section, it is like a comet, right? So it is white and necrotic. It appears like a comedone. So that's why the term comedo. Non-comedo DCIS, it shows a monomorphic population of tumor cells with nucleogrades ranging from low to high. So the tumor cells are smaller and more regular, and necrosis is minimal or absent in non-comedo. So first we have solid DCIS in which the cells completely fill the spaces. Then cribriform DCIS in which there are spaces between the cells giving a cribriform pattern. Papillary DCIS which have fibrovascular cores, and micropapillary DCIS, so they're just protrusions without a fibrovascular core. Okay. Next, we have lobular carcinoma in situ. The only thing you need to remember for this precursor lesion is cells appear lobular. Why? Because they are not attached to each other. If cells attached to each other, then See, if the cell is normal, it is round. If it is attached to another cell, it is in contact, it becomes somewhat ovular. So it is not attached, that is why it is lobular. Why is it not attached? Because there is E-cadherin mutation, so there is lack of E-cadherin. Okay, that is an immunohistochemical marker. E-cadherin, lack of it. So okay, so lobular carcinoma, it arises in the TDLU, it tends to be bilateral, more common in young women. So basically there are E-cadherin mutations, so loss of that results in rounded tumor cells, and lack of E-cadherin confirms the lobular nature of neoplastic cells. So morphology, you can see loose and non-cohesive or discohesive cells with oval or round regular nuclei and small nucleoli. The tumor cells are smaller and more monotonous. And because it is round, so you have ring cells, so signet ring cells, which are mucin positive because they are lobular cells, they secrete mucin. Immunohistochemistry, so there is lack of E-cadherin. They almost always express ER and PR, okay, but they do not overexpress HER2 or NEU. Moving on to invasive or infiltrating carcinoma, it is the most common histological subtype of breast carcinoma, and it can be classified on morphological and molecular basis. So morphologically, you can classify it as no special type. So 2/3 are grouped together and are called ductal or no special type, and special histological subtype is present about 1/3 of breast cancers. Next, molecular classification, it is based on the expression of estrogen and estrogen receptor ER and HER2. And based on that, it can be divided into 3 subgroups. The third subgroup is always triple negative, ER negative, HER2 negative. The first subgroup is ER positive but HER2 negative, and there is low proliferation. Okay, so ER positive, HER2 negative, and again there are 2 subgroups, low proliferation and high proliferation. So ER positive, HER2 negative is the most common subtype of invasive breast cancer. They constitute about 50% of cancers, and it is subdivided into 2 groups again. So in ER positive, HER2 negative, low proliferation group, this tumor forms the majority of cancers in old women and in men. Okay, majority they are detected at an early stage, and mostly the mutation is PI3K somatic mutation. Okay, and ER positive, HER2 negative, high proliferation, it is the most common carcinoma associated with BRCA2 germline mutation carriers. Okay, next HER2 positive, ER positive, HER2 negative. Next, HER2 positive. It is the second most common molecular subtype of infiltrative breast cancer. It's more common in young women. Okay, and it is identified by excess of HER2 protein overexpression or HER2 gene amplification. They metastasize early to the brain and the bone, and even when the tumor is small in size. So about 1/3 or more of these patients respond completely to antibodies that block the HER2, and they have an excellent prognosis. So ER negative, HER2 negative breast cancers, they are triple negative carcinoma or basal-like. Okay, so they are also seen in young women. They are basal-like. Again, you see TP53 mutations. So they are the third major molecular subtype. They occur in young premenopausal women. They form the majority of carcinomas in women with BRCA1 mutations. They have high proliferation and rapid growth. They present as a palpable mass. They can metastasize when small in size also, frequently to the viscera and the brain. Okay. However, about 30% respond to chemotherapy, and cure may be possible in chemosensitive subgroup. What are the common features? So first, invasion. Obviously, it is there in the name itself, infiltrating or invasive carcinoma. It is characterized by the presence of tumor cells outside the duct lobular units and into the surrounding stroma. Desmoplasia. It is characterized by marked stromal fibrosis. So what is the clinical presentation? Almost always produces a palpable mass, and 50% of patients, they are associated with axillary lymph node metastasis. So again, there is puckering of the skin. Invasion causes dimpling of the skin or fixation of the tumor to the underlying chest wall. There is retraction of the nipple, which may occur when tumor involves the central portion of the breast. There is purity orange appearance, and there is lymphatic involvement. So it may block the local area of skin drainage and cause lymphedema and thickening of the skin. Mammographically, you can see a radiodense mass. So infiltrative carcinoma, no special type. So invasive carcinomas of no special type, they constitute about 80% of carcinomas. Large carcinomas may infiltrate the pectoralis muscle, and they may fix to the chest wall or invade into the dermis and produce dimpling of the skin. So rarely it may first present as a metastasis to an axillary node or distant metastasis before it is detected in the breast. So primarily you can detect it. So primary carcinoma in these cases, in these rare cases, it may be small or masked by dense breast tissue, or it may not produce a desmoplastic response that is palpable. So this causes difficulty in detecting them by palpation or mammography. So morphology, what is that? It is firm to hard in consistency because of desmoplasia. Okay, rare cases only, there is no desmoplastic response, so you cannot see. So there is dense fibrous stroma because of desmoplasia. It is firm to hard in consistency. There is an irregular outline. Okay, you can see here on cut section, you can see a water chestnut like cutting or grating sound. It is firm, hard in consistency. Irregular borders are there because they infiltrate. Okay, and also it retracts below the surface. Next, microscopically, you have invasive breast carcinoma, which is graded according to the Nottingham score. So in TNM staging, it is for tumor node metastasis, but here Nottingham score, it is for tubule formation, nuclear pleomorphism, and mitotic rate. These points are added and carcinomas are graded into 1, 2 and 3 grades. So grade 1 is well differentiated carcinoma. So there are prominent tubules, okay, T. Next, tumor cells have small round nuclei, okay, there's no pleomorphism and mitotic figures are rare. In grade 2, the tumor cells may form tubules, but they also show solid clusters or single cells. Okay, and also there is greater degree of nuclear pleomorphism and mitotic figures, T and M. Next, tubules are not there in grade 3. Solid nests or sheets of cells are present. There are pleomorphic nuclei, numerous enlarged nuclei, and also mitotic figures and areas of necrosis. Next, ER positive HER2 negative carcinoma, the second type. Mostly they are well differentiated carcinomas, but it may range from well to poorly differentiated. Mucinous papillary cribriform patterns may be seen. HER2 positive carcinoma, there is no specific morphological pattern and they are poorly differentiated. And triple negative carcinomas, they are poorly differentiated. They have circumscribed pushing borders with a central necrotic center. Okay. Next, special histological subtypes. So we have, again we can classify them based on the expression of ER and HER2. Okay. Next, medullary carcinoma. It is again a triple negative cancer. There is somatic hypermethylation of BRCA1 and it is a well circumscribed mass. Okay, medulla, so it is soft, obviously, desmoplasia is less, and it occurs in the 6th decade. It is a special type of triple negative cancer. Okay, so that is what is given here. Special type of triple negative cancer, 6th decade, well circumscribed mass. It mimics a benign lesion in the medulla, and there are hypermethylation somatic changes of BRCA1 promoter regions. Okay, germline mutations of BRCA1 are not found. So gross, again there is no usually does not produce desmoplasia, so that is why it is soft, pale gray and fleshy. Okay, and it is well circumscribed. It is more yielding on palpation and cutting than typical breast carcinomas. There is no chestnut sound. Okay. Microscopically, they are poorly differentiated, so tumor cells, they are arranged in solid syncytium-like masses, okay? So medulla, here you can see solid syncytium-like masses with hyperchromatic nuclei and prominent nucleoli. There is a syncytium. And again, you can see a scant stroma with inflammatory cells and plasma cells, okay? So here solid syncytium-like cytoplasmic mass. So there are large pleomorphic nuclei and cells are pleomorphic, prominent nucleoli, mitotic figures are frequent. And again, stroma, you can see minimal stroma with lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate in the middle, and you can see pushing non-infiltrative borders. So here you can, the syncytial growth pattern, it is because of overexpression of cell adhesion molecules. So the cells adhere to each other, they appear like a syncytium because of E-cadherin, which can limit the metastatic potential. That is why it is benign, pushing or non-infiltrative border. So prognosis, there is a slightly better prognosis than no specific type because of host immune response. There are lymphocytes in the stroma. HER2 new overexpression is not observed. Next, in mucinous or colloid carcinoma, you need to remember that there is extracellular mucin. Okay, so it is soft or rubbery again. It is also gray, pale gray, and gelatinous appearance here, whereas there was fleshy appearance here. And borders are pushing or circumscribed, and there is glistening surface and mucoid consistency. Gross. Next, mucinous, they occur in older women and they are slow growing. Microscopically, you can see to secrete mucus, you need cuboidal or columnar cells. They have to be arranged in islands. Occasionally, they form glands, and background shows large amounts of extracellular mucin. So, molecular pathology, they are usually diploid and ER positive. Lymph node metastasis are uncommon, and prognosis is better than infiltrating ductal or lobular carcinoma. And tubular carcinoma, again, it is an uncommon variant. So gross, it is smaller than 1 centimeter in size, and microscopically it is very well differentiated into tubules and consists of well formed angulated tubules separated by dense stroma. Okay, here you can see. Next, invasive lobular carcinoma, most tumors show biallelic loss of expression of CDH1, which encodes E-cadherin. Due to loss of E-cadherin, there are discohesive cells and there is no desmoplastic response. Loss of E-cadherin, there is discohesive cells. Okay, cells are arranged in the Indian file-like pattern linearly, and there is lots of stroma. Okay, so there is no desmoplastic response. And morphology, so it presents as a palpable mass. There is greater bilateral incidence. Microscopy, you can see Indian file-like pattern. So tumor cells are arranged in single file. There are loose and discohesive cells. The cells are small and monotonous with oval or round regular nuclei and small nucleoli. Signet ring cells containing mucin are common. Tubule formation is absent because Indian file pattern is seen, and desmoplasia may be minimal or absent. Okay, desmoplasia is not there in lobular carcinoma. Within the lobule, you don't have fibers. Metastasis, so it can metastasize to the peritoneum and retroperitoneum, the leptomeninges, the GI tract, the ovaries, and the uterus. And again, clinical patterns, you have inflammatory carcinoma. Inflammatory carcinoma, it may be mistaken as an inflammatory condition because there is rubor and tumors. So the breasts are swollen and erythematous due to extensive invasion and obstruction of the lymphatics by tumor cells. There is no distinct palpable mass, so you mistake it as an inflammatory condition because of the delay in diagnosis. So already many patients develop metastasis by the time of delayed diagnosis, and the prognosis is poor. Okay, so this is how you draw that. Moving on to Paget's disease of the nipple, it is a rare manifestation of ductal carcinoma, either in situ or invasive. So basically, gross, the skin of the nipple and areola shows ulceration with oozing resembling eczema. Okay, oozing resembling eczema and ulceration. U for ulceration, like this, oozing resembling eczema. Next, microscopically, the skin lesions in the nipple shows clusters of malignant cells known as Paget cells in the epidermis, which are large spherical cells with clear cytoplasm and hyperchromatic nuclei. Okay, large spherical cells with clear cytoplasm, hyperchromatic nuclei. Paget cells are seen, clusters of malignant cells in the nipple, and the they are seen in the nipple and epidermis without infiltrating the basement membrane. These cells, they represent extension from the underlying ductal carcinoma via the lactiferous sinuses. The tumor cells, they grow, allow seepage of extracellular fluid onto the nipple, which you can see as an oozing eczema. And Paget cells can be detected by biopsy or cytological examination of the exudate. So immunohistochemistry, they are usually poorly differentiated, ER negative, and overexpress HER2/neu. So clinical presentation, it presents as a unilateral erythematous eruption in the region of the nipple. It is usually pruritic or itching is common in the nipple, and it is mistaken for eczema. Palpable mass is present in 50% of women, and it shows underlying invasive carcinoma. Majority of women without a palpable mass only have DCIS, ductal carcinoma in situ. Okay, here you can see. Moving on to the spread of breast carcinoma, so there are various routes of spread of breast cancer. So directly it can spread onto the skin, including nipple and areola or the chest wall. Lymphatics, it can spread to axillary lymph nodes, internal mammary lymph nodes, and or parasternal and supraclavicular lymph node, Virchow. And also hematogenously, it can spread to bone, brain, liver, and lung. So prognostic and predictive factors, you have major and minor factors. So the two important prognostic factors are tumor size and lymph node status. Okay, so they can be divided into two groups. They're related to the extent of the carcinoma, underlying biology of the cancer. So prognostic factors related to the extent of carcinoma. First, remember it as in situ. Is it in situ or not? So majority of adequately treated DCIS are cured. Invasive carcinomas, they have metastasis by the time of diagnosis, 50% of them. So in situ or not. So what is the size? So tumor size, carcinoma of less than 1 centimeter in size without lymph node metastasis has 10-year survival rate of over 90%. Okay. So again, for more than 2 centimeters, it drops to 77%. Okay. Next, so is the size less or more? Less size, obviously better prognosis. Next, is it inflammatory or not? Because inflammation, we already saw that it has a poor prognosis. It is characterized by breast erythema and skin thickening. And also there is purity orange appearance, and also it has a poor prognosis because of blockage of lymphatic drainage, etc. Most of these, they are ER negative and overexpress HER2. Next, after inflammation, is it invasive or not? So is there lymphovascular invasion or not? So in about 50% of invasive carcinomas, tumor cells are found within the vascular spaces. This is strongly associated with lymph node metastasis, and it is a poor prognostic factor. Next, then after it has invaded the lymphatic vessels or the blood vessels, is it metastasizing to the distant metastasis or not? Because if it metastasizes to distant sites, the cure is unlikely. And has it gone to the lymph nodes or not? So status of the axillary lymph node is the most important prognostic factor in the absence of distant metastasis. So you have to see the number of nodes involved and the extent of which each node is involved, so the level of node involved. And also lymphatic vessels, most carcinomas, they drain into 1 or 2 lymph nodes, which are known as sentinel nodes. They are usually examined for metastasis. So macrometastasis are metastasis greater than 0.2 centimeters, and micro is less than 0.2 centimeters. So till recently, status of lymph node was considered as a major determinant of treatment choice, but now molecular staging is more important. Now moving on to prognostic factors related to the underlying biology of cancer, they're all minor factors. So you have molecular subtypes, so expression of HER2, ER, etc. It is an important prognostic factor. Next, there is a special histological type. So mostly special survival rate is more than non-specific type. And also histological trait. So you have Nottingham histological score. It is also known as Scarf-Bloom-Richardson score. It is the most commonly used grading system. So there is T and M, tubule formation, nuclear grade, and mitotic rate. Next, you see proliferative rate. So it is measured by counting the mitotic figures by histology or immunohistochemical detection of proteins such as cyclins or Ki67. Proliferative rate is more important for ER positive, HER2 negative carcinomas. Most ER negative and HER2 positive carcinomas, they have high proliferative rates. HER2 is there means high proliferation. So high proliferation means poor prognosis, and it responds better to chemotherapy. Next, estrogen and progesterone receptors. So if the estrogen and progesterone receptors are positive, then the carcinomas, they respond to hormones. Okay, whereas ER positive cancers are less likely to respond to chemotherapy, whereas ER and PR negative cancers, they respond more to chemotherapy. HER2 new overexpression is associated with poor survival, and RNA expression profiling is a new method used for subclassifying cancers. So many of the genes that predict prognosis are involved in proliferation. Now finally, most common site of metastasis is bone. So first lumbar vertebra, then femur, thoracic vertebra, rib and skull. So triple assessment in breast cancer is clinical examination, mammography and FNAC. Next, stromal or fibroepithelial tumors. There are two tumors that arise from intralobular stroma. They are fibroadenoma and phylloids tumor. It arises from intralobular stroma, that is the origin. It presents as a breast mouse. Okay, so palpable and freely movable mass. Okay, it occurs in females between 20 to 30 years. So what is a gross finding? So it is a single or multiple unilateral or bilateral. So spherical nodules are usually well circumscribed and freely movable. So if you see a mouse, it is spherical, well circumscribed and easily movable like a mouse. So it accounts for mobility on clinical examination. It is known as breast mouse. Cut section. It appears as rubbery, glistening grayish white nodules. If you look at a mouse, it is grayish white. And again, mouse is rubbery to touch. And if you cut it, the organs glisten. So it is glistening. There are slit-like spaces. Size varies. Microscopically, you can see a mixture of duct-like structures and fibrous connective tissue. So on the mouse, you can see fibers, right? The fur, and also you can see the tail, which looks like a duct. So mixture of ducts and fibrous connective tissue. So ducts may be simple or round or elongated and branching. And epithelium lining the ducts ranges from double layer of epithelium of normal lobules to varying degrees of hyperplasia. And again, you can see fibrous connective tissue stroma. So the stroma is delicate, cellular, often myxoid. Okay, next, there could be classification also. There is pericanalicular type, so regular round oval configuration of the glands is maintained. Okay, and the epithelium forms ducts with patent lumen, and the fibrosis or the surrounding stroma, it is only circumferential. It does not go into the canaliculi. Whereas intracanalicular type, the connective tissue invaginates into the glandular spaces so that it appears within them, and the round configuration is lost. So it reduces the tubules or glandular configuration to curvy linear slits. Usually both patterns, they coexist. Okay. And again, hormonal induced changes are present in these things in fibroadenomas. So there are epithelial changes during pregnancy. The fibroadenomas may grow rapidly in size and the glands may increase in size. And stromal changes in older women, the stroma may become more fibrous and densely hyalized over time. It can form popcorn calcifications. Next, morphological variants of fibroadenoma. You have tubular adenoma, you have lactating adenoma if it's composed of SNA with secretory activity. And juvenile fibroadenoma, it is an uncommon variant that is larger in adults and girls. Phylloides tumor, it is biphasic. It peaks in the 5th decade. So biphasic means it has double layered epithelium in the clefts and hypercellular mesenchyme arranged in leaves of phylloid. That is the name. So it's a group of biphasic neoplasm characterized by double layered epithelial component arranged in clefts surrounded by hypercellular mesenchymal component arranged in leaf-like structures. So it again originates from intralobular stroma. The terminology, it is originally known as cystosarcoma phylloides to imply malignant behavior. But then on, we found that most of them behaved in a benign fashion, so we call them phylloids tumor. Age group, they occur between 30 to 70 years, peak in the 5th decade, clinically palpable masses. And again, benign phylloids tumor, it is round, sharply circumscribed. Malignant phylloids, it is poorly circumscribed and it is locally invasive with infiltrative borders. So cut surface, again, this is also gray white. It is a bulging mass. It is firm and glistening, just like fibroadenoma. It shows characteristic whorl pattern with curved cleft-like spaces that resemble the leaf buds. Here you can see a characteristic whorl pattern with cleft-like spaces that resemble the leaf buds. Okay, leaf buds. Next, leaf-like appearance is due to the epithelium which covers the nodules of the proliferating stroma. Microscopically, you can see exaggerated intracanalicular growth pattern with leaf-like projections into the dilated lumens. There are two key features. Okay, benign epithelial component, it consists of luminal epithelial and myoepithelial cells. They cover the large club-like leaf projections. And you can see stromal hypercellularity. It is a component, it is the amount and appearance of the stromal component that determines the biological nature of the neoplasm. So grading, depending on the appearance of stromal component, we grade it into low grade and high grade. So low grade or benign, it resembles fibroadenoma, but the stroma has following additional features. It is more cellular, it contains mitotic figures, and high grade you can see hypercellular stroma, abundant mitotic activity, and marked pleomorphism of the stromal cells. So recurrence, they are likely to recur if not excised with wide margins, and low grade tumors may recur locally but rarely metastasize, and high grade lesions frequently recur and may also develop homogeneous heterogeneous metastasis.